right. It is 3 o'clock, and the organizers are really great about making sure that I start on time and make sure that I'm respectful of your time. Before I jump in, because I'm one of those people who doesn't always arrive right at the top of the hour. I'd love it if you could come off of mute for a second, just say your name, where you're from. That way I can continue to kind of admit people as they come in. So, again, if you could just share your name, where you're from, and something about AI that excites you.
All right, I'll go first. My name is Marshall. I'm from Central California, and something that excites me is just, I guess, the possibilities that AI brings to students.
Love that. Thank you.
Hey, CJ Toro, Fort Lee, New Jersey. And I'm excited to see what new stuff we're going to get in math because typing up math stuff has been a nightmare forever for math teachers. So trying to figure out how we could leverage new tech in that realm is exciting.
Very cool. Thanks, CJ.
Hi, I'm Dan Peterson. I'm from Central Florida, kind of near Orlando area. I'm a vice principal at a private K-8 school, and math for sure. I agree with CJ there. Math is definitely needed. Some new tools and just creative ways that students can be a little bit more creative, or we can engage students more creative. I think AI helps a lot with that.
Awesome. Well, the next person comes off mute, Jen from Dallas, Texas. So she's having a little trouble with her mic. So she says that something about AI that excites her is love to learn from others things that are working. So thank you, Jen. Appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Zaina from Southern California, and I'd have to go with I forgot his name, so sorry. The first guy who spoke, just the possibilities and making learning fun again, because technology is amazing and we don't use it in a fun way anymore for kids.
Definitely feel that. For those who have just joined, we're just sharing name, where you're from, and something about AI that excites you. Nancy from Airdrie, Alberta, Canada. Thanks for popping in the chat. Oh, Sherry, I'm sorry. I'm going to probably mess up your town name from Idaho, so I apologize. Coeur d'Alene?
So close. Coeur d'Alene.
Sorry. Thank you.
That's all right. It happens all the time. Such a funny spelling too.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate your point about efficiency. That is so true. All right, so I think most of the people have kind of popped in and we've been sharing. I've got one more message here, David from Baltimore, that I'm so happy to have everyone here. I'm gonna kind of jump in. What we're gonna do in this session is we're gonna talk about FERPA. We're going to talk about data privacy with students, but also how we could still work within the bounds of FERPA, utilize AI to really help us with some data analysis. I'll talk about later, I have a couple of mock data sets. And with these, we'll even get to practice a little bit. I'll kind of show you what that might look like, some of the questions that I've sort of been playing with within AI. Again, these are fictional data sets that we'll be using for these examples. So to kind of start off, we're going to be looking at FERPA, just a little reminder. I know that's can be a little bit dull, but it is so important in this day and age. One thing that one bit of advice that was very helpful to me early on in my professional career, in fact, when I was student teaching, my mentor teacher said, when communicating with families or things like that, never put anything out to a family or a guardian or anything like that that you wouldn't want printed in the newspaper. And that is this kind of approach that I take with AI, that if I wouldn't print it in a local newspaper kind of thing, if it wouldn't pass the test for that, then I don't put it into AI about my students. Because again, as we're familiar, many of us, with large language models, the more data it has and things like that, the more it can learn. And so this information is reviewed, it is used. So thinking of putting it into ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or things like that, we still need to be very cognizant of data privacy for our students and making sure that we are working within the bounds of FERPA. So just as a quick reminder for FERPA, just a couple of quick provisions, things to kind of think about with it, just because again, it's not always something that we carry around in our brains every second of the day. So again, this idea that students have rights to their information and their educational records as maintained by the school. So attendance records, grades, etc., all of these things. And so we just need to make sure that this is, as a school, is available and that we are respectful of those things. Disclosures. So if we are sharing detailed personal information or things that contain PII, personally identifiable information, sometimes I'm so used to, especially here in Minnesota, the discussion of PII that I'm trying to make sure that I don't slip into my alphabet soup right away. Personally identifiable information. So when there are certain statutes, this is the broad federal interpretation. Obviously, given how large of a conference Sequoia is, I did not address specific states or provinces in here, so just be mindful of that when you're thinking about these things moving forward. And then, again, the ability to correct any misinformation. If, for example, if a student's attendance record is incorrect and things like that, that parents have a right to request that these records and things get corrected. And just so I am being, very clear on PII, this is any data point that could identify someone as a specific individual. Examples, this is not an all-inclusive list. For example, on here, there isn't a teacher's name and school name. That could help to identify certain students, things like that. But generally, what is most often referenced is student's full name, date of birth. I put Social Security on here because that's directly from FERPA, although most of us don't even know our students' Social Security numbers, let alone would be sharing them in any kind of public way. uh, home address, telephone number, etc. And so all of these sorts of pieces that we wouldn't, again, publish in that local newspaper or share with a local news source can't be put into AI if we're going to be using this for data analysis. And so how do we take advantage of the power and the possibility of AI without without operating outside of the realm of FERPA or student privacy? So again, in a day and age where we do a lot of data analysis and things like that, that there is so much data that is being collected from assignments to test analysis to things like daily attendance, all of these things that some PLCs or professional learning communities or teacher groups or things like that are already discussing and analyzing. Some things that some groups that aren't doing it but are considering, all of these things that it's very potent way to kind of refresh how we're looking at our students if we have a more robust and complete picture when making instructional decisions. And so we need to make sure that when we use outside tools that we are handling the PII very carefully. Thankfully, the way to do this is fairly simple. In fact, I've seen it happen already sort of organically in elementary classrooms a lot. We'll talk about that in a moment. But making sure that we can balance those instructional improvement decisions as a result of our data analysis, keeping in mind those privacy concerns and not releasing students' name, address, things like that, especially when we live in a day and age where there may be a parent, family member, et cetera, who doesn't have right to access a student's information. So just making sure that we're balancing those things. And so this is where we essentially make students anonymous on our data sheets. And very simply, I have seen some people do things like they rename students with a very basic alphanumeric sort of code, straight numbers from a classroom. As I alluded to earlier, there are a lot of elementary classrooms that I've seen in particular, some that go older than that, where students have a particular number. For example, my son in his second grade class always puts Luke Gregory number 4, that he's always number 4 in his class. That is an easy way to do sort of like a find replace on a particular data sheet, things like that. Some people have gotten really fun and crazy and done things like where they give students famous names or historical names or things like that to make their particular individual in their classroom anonymous, but they still know when looking at this sheet who it is based on the moniker that they've assigned. So this is just sort of one example of a mock data set. I wanted to show a larger version before I kind of hopped into another portion where we can kind of play with what one might do. I didn't want the entire presentation to be purely theoretical, discussing just data privacy, but okay, now that we've sort of modified our data set, what can we do with that? What sort of questions can we ask in AI? What can we do with it? to make sure that you didn't have to spend all your time watching me type, I do have a sheet of pre-prepared questions that I'll copy paste. So if you see me kind of bouncing between screens, I promise the intent is not to make you dizzy, but to get through those questions, see how AI responds to them in real time, and then invite you to kind of brainstorm some of your own questions and things like that. So going to kind of bounce through that. I'm sorry, I was going to Google Meet recently, and you have to change your screen, your particular tabs. Is if somebody could give me a thumbs up that we're all looking at my chat GPT right now. Awesome, thank you. All right, so for this one, I have a mock data set that I have again created. Just kind of, I actually had AI help me to create a mock data set. And here, why don't I go ahead and show you just a moment here. Okay, again, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my Excel sheet? Okay, thank you to my peeps helping out here. 1 second. Okay, so now what I just did was I asked for I've got student ID. I should clarify on the ID part, school or state IDs are considered PII. So these are randomized numbers, they're IDs that I have given a group of students. It is not their school ID numbers. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear on that point. To do this, I have put together their days absent, their current class percentage, the number of assignments turned in, their fall math score, fall reading, and then winter math and reading scores as well. Just to kind of give an example of some things that you may or may not include in a data file for analysis. All right, 1 second here. Gotta admit a couple of people and then I'll switch screens. All right, so that is the data set that I have included on ChatGPT. For the sake of clarity, I am using ChatGPT 4, which is the paid version, not the free 3.5. If you are a regular AI user, I don't generally hawk subscriptions, but personally, I do love this. So food for thought. The first thing that I've got here, the first question is, using the data set attached, answer the following data analysis question. What are the strengths of the student responses that we have collected? And again, I've got a bunch of different questions, and I do apologize. I'll be kind of bouncing back and forth just so people can, again, I save some time and you don't have to watch me type. All right. So it's analyzing the particular document, and it's working through all of the different things, the class grade percentage and assignment percentage, talking about the kind of insights, the improvements from fall to winter. Again, this, because I'm using a mock data set, this is purely fiction. And so your answers and things like that are going to be a little bit different because it'll be authentic to your situation. Looking at the various comments that it has on it, I'm trying to discuss it without reading it to you, so apologize as I kind of stumble through a little bit. But I like that it talked about the class average. It brought in also the percentage of assignments put in, and talks about, indicating an overall strong performance. It's looking at how the reading and math scores improved from fall to winter. And what's sort of interesting is it even gave us an attendance correlation. It did it specifically in a statistical fashion, which is why you see the -0.9, and which, if you're not a statistics lover, you can always ask for a follow-up question on those kinds of things. So I love asking about anomalies. That it always produces not only fascinating results, but I have noticed in my use with AI, in looking at student results with it, that because it's got a fresh perspective, it often can catch things that maybe, because I'm working with the kids day in, day out, aren't at the top of my brain. So again, it takes just a moment because it's going back to the Excel file that I uploaded for analysis. And sorry, I'm doing my best not to do like corny hold music for you. So, all right. Was kind of interesting, again, it's using descriptive statistics. So it's looking at an average of days absent, looking at the range, and looking at potential performance drops. So it's looking at, things saying, okay, there's no particular drop in math or in reading that's greater than one standard deviation, which is sort of interesting because it can really give you a better idea, looking at the standard deviations of how close or far apart your students may be in a particular setting. As we know, in most classrooms, students are all over the place. So in a real data set, this would likely be greater than one standard deviation. But again, using a mock one, it's kept it a little bit tighter than what we might see in a lot of traditional classrooms. Sorry about that. So looking at average improvement, and this is, specifically for reading from fall to winter. If I was using a standardized assessment, I might look at that company's particular charts to compare it to there. If I'm using my own content-based measure or CBM, I might compare it to year after year or to other classrooms. There are opportunities there to kind of look at those things. Then this one, I always like to think about when I'm doing things like assigning homework. So is there any correlation that the AI can see in the data between assignment completion, so the number of assignments turned in, and improved math scores? So while that populates, I will, so Mariana, with the my fictional data sets, at the end, I will upload those if it's something that you want to play with. So I'm sorry if I kept you waiting on the chat. I sometimes forget to check that, so feel free to flag me down if I miss somebody. So again, it's going to look at the correlation, and the math scores is 0.156. Again, because the measures are based in statistics, feel free to ask follow-up questions if you're looking for a little bit more unpacking. You know, talking about this is a positive, but still relatively weak correlation. And so for me, I might, as a classroom instructor reading that, go, okay, so some of my assignments, and perhaps not all of them, because this is just those that have been completed, weren't doing as much of weren't providing as much of a service or practice to students that I would have liked to see. There's not a stronger correlation between homework or assignments that they're doing and an impact there. Now that could be on your classroom test, on a standardized assessment, that totally depends on your preference and the instrument that you're using on how tightly you want those to align or not. There's a lot of variability. Ooh, interesting. Dan just asked, will it give key values? That is actually, Dan, thank you for asking that. That's not a question I had on there. So, thanks for all my math peeps. Fun. All right. So again, a different kind of measure, but talking about that it could likely just be due to chance. It's not strong statistical evidence. Dan, I really like the conversation going here, but everybody feel that's very cool. And then so now I was just curious about the same thing. So we did math. So now how about for reading? And as it goes back to so again, in looking at this, I see a weak inverse relationship. So some of the things that I'm assigning either as homework, practice, whatever, isn't doing everything I'm hoping for. So looking at this and this analysis, I might want to rethink some things when making changes like this and kind of testing the waters and looking at things over time. I don't recommend changing everything, but a little bit at a time, so you can really check for that variable and seeing what impact it had over time. The other things I want to show you as I open up just a moment, I even created for this okay, can I get a thumbs up if we're looking at an Excel sheet again? Perfect. Okay, thank you. So this one, I decided to wear the hat, if you will, of a 6th grade math teacher working on inverse equations. So this I did as sort of, if I were giving a 15-question test on these particular equations, assuming it's sort of early on, seeing where students are at, and if the student got it right, they got a 1, they got it wrong, they got a 0. And I put the equations across the top here, just so when I have the AI look at it, it can kind of pick apart the questions as well. Now, I did it this way for this particular format. If I were doing it as truly a classroom teacher, the way I would collect this information is I would have the students do the test on paper, write it out, and then to save myself the time of entering in the information one by one is then I would have students put their answers in on a Google form. So I could have this and I would be able to do the analysis, but do all of it in a way that's very time saving and friendly to my schedule. But I just, again, wanted to show you how I set this up for this example. So as I switch back over, so I'm going to attach the data set here and grab my question. So to make sure that the AI knew exactly what I was doing, since it was a little unusual, I stipulated that the column header has the problem that the students had to solve for. So which problem had the highest number of incorrect answers? Okay. So, sorry, saw one thing, that it goofed up on, so I need to. It wouldn't be an AI session if we didn't have a hallucination. Okay, so now that it's saying, okay, so this is the problem that most of the students or had the highest number of incorrect responses. And so I was able to very quickly go through this and go, okay, so it looks like there are some issues here with negative numbers when manipulating inverse equations. Then, okay, the same thing on the other side here. Which one had the highest number of correct answers? Again, it's a little interesting that the problem with division had the largest number of correct responses, but we've all had classes that surprise us. Then, just curious, so based on the student performance on this math test, what components of inverse equations do you recommend for review? I really like asking questions like this if you happen to be in a building where perhaps you are the single teacher for a grade. Using AI as is kind of a brainstorming partner is probably one of my top 5 favorite uses for AI. So again, it's picking up on the fact that a stumbling block may have been solving equations with negative solutions, so that looking at perhaps even pulling in things like number lines or things like that to really help students visualize that piece. The making sure that we're hitting on that foundational component of it being an inverse operation. And so Okay, the review should emphasize these particular things: how to perform arithmetic operations, problem-solving strategies, all different kinds of things that I may or may not have come up with on my own, but maybe not this fast. So then, if perhaps I want to do my review in sort of a tiered fashion or a group fashion, and maybe I have a teaching partner or a para, or perhaps how I structure my day, smaller groups are easier for me. That, okay, how would I group? And then it's kind of interesting, again, sort of as a brainstorming partner, that looking at how I might break this up gives me some different ideas on what that might be. I tend to, in looking at this answer, I like it a little bit better talking about where the difficulties lie rather than classifying them as high, middle, or emerging performers, but that's a personal preference of mine, but it still gives me something to kind of consider. I do think it's quite hilarious when it talks about considering group dynamics, because as far as I'm concerned, educators are fabulous at considering group dynamics. That's probably the one thing we don't need a reminder on. But different things to kind of think about, and adjusting groups in a very quick and live fashion. So, sorry everyone, let's try and get this. Okay, if I were to use the student numbers from the Excel files, so place the students into the 3 groups based on their test performance. That, again, for some educators, grouping in this way and based on these difficulties is very attractive and very easy for them to implement. Others tend to prefer pairing high and low performers and mixing those up. That is a request I can also make within ChatGPT. So I don't want to be misleading to anyone and make you think for a moment that asking for grouping in this particular fashion is the only way you can do it. I could also ask for pairings based on high and low and having students work together. If, for example, I was trying to put a heavy emphasis on peer tutoring or peer review, that would be one way I would go about that. So again, it's now populating based on all of those things, those particular numbers. This just gives me a starting point. This is not the be all end all. As ChatGPT even pointed out, I'm probably going to consider particular group dynamics and what might be advantageous for students, or I might look at something like the emerging performers group is a pretty significant sized group. So maybe I want to break those in 2, all sorts of things, but it gives me sort of a different starting point that I perhaps might not have considered. Now, my last one is a big one and is just, I love this one. So there are some schools out there that are just amazing at PLCs, are amazing at data analysis. This question set is actually from a data analysis paper from out of the University of Auckland in 2008. And what I did was some districts, some schools have guiding questions for data analysis when working on tests that are outside of your standardized tests, perhaps a curriculum-based measure or a grade level assessment that your school district, et cetera, performs. So I was curious, if I threw a whole bunch at it at once, what would I get in response? And so again, this is, I will include my source here if you, for Sequoia, they asked us to include all of our materials, so I'll make sure that that's one of them as well. So I took all of these questions because I loved how it was formatted. Wish I could say I did it personally, but I'll give credit where credit is due. So here we go. Here's the fun part. So it's gonna kind of go through right now. This first part is just processing all of the questions that I threw at it all at once. And again, since I did 7 questions, it'll take a little bit longer than the standard question, but definitely this is a great way for me. Say I'm an administrator and I'm going to go from PLC to PLC. This is a great way for me to really get a high level view of a grade or grade band before I step into the meeting, so that I can be a contributing member of that meeting. Because I've been in those meetings where somebody goes, okay, catch me up on everything. And so now it's going to go through each of the things, talking about what are the strength of student responses, which ones particularly stand out. And then what indicates an ideal or proficient response, high number of correct responses, low number, what is the most difficult, and then it's going to make a conjecture at the learning needs. I put a strong emphasis on conjecture because the AI is looking at an incomplete picture of your students. So that's where I say this is a really great like meeting primer, because then you'll be able to talk about all of the other components that inform our decision making about students, classroom behavior, home situation, all of the other details and things that we collect over time to make this a little more robust. But this really gives us a quick way to talk about all of these pieces, look at all of these pieces, and still do, you know, silly little things like sleep at night, or say have the audacity to have a hobby. Something that will really help us make data-driven decisions without being driven data crazy. And so in an age where we are data rich, it isn't uncommon for it to feel like too much and sometimes just overwhelming. And then we don't get to make all of these decisions despite the plethora of data available to us. And so making sure that we are doing things like making our students anonymous on our files, we can utilize AI to make data informed decisions and really elevate our discussions and PLCs and things without it being all consuming and contributing to the staggeringly high rate of burnout in the education profession. I'm going to stop there for 2 reasons. Number one, they asked me to try and keep it to 45 minutes. So number 2, you can ask any questions, things like that. And then I will, while we're kind of talking, I'll do my best to upload files and things to the chat, but it will also be emailed to Sequoia to be made available on the website if you don't want to download it from the chat. And yeah, that way I don't mess up being able to get to your next session as well. If you would do me a favor, since I'm going to be working on the files, if you could take yourself off mute to ask the question so I can multitask for all the attendees, please.
And Christina, I had a question, might be a little bit on the wonkier side, but is GPT-4 doing actual math there? Does it have like an extra add-on or something? Because I know that in 3.5, when I ask it to do something like give me a correlation, it gives me a number that looks like it could be right, but it isn't actually when you do the work.
Yeah, again, ChatGPT 4 does a little bit more, has additional functionality. So that's why I used it here. I usually, my presentations like to stick to free resources, but for the level of functionality and doing things like the extra step of demonstrating its understanding of the inverse equations, I did go with ChatGPT 4.
So like so just to clarify, is it doing real math?
Yes.
Okay. Just because I would imagine that, when I bring it back to my district, one of the things that they're trying to roll out is essentially a tiering system for additional instruction for students at lower achievement levels or lower, or ELLs and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I could see some ethical problems if it's not doing the real math there, if it's just doing something that looks like it might be math.
Yeah, exactly. That's problematic on a couple of fronts, and I appreciate any district that takes caution. All right, and feel free to keep asking questions. If I look away, it's just because I am trying to upload those mock data sets for you. All right, so there are, again, because those are mock and totally fictional, feel free if you want to use them, play with them. It's totally uh, up to you. And then the data analysis questions, that chunk that I used at the end, that file is uploaded as well. Last but not least will be the PDF of the presentation today, which will also be available on Sequoia if you don't want to grab that immediately. All right. I am so grateful for everyone coming here today. This was just a really exciting opportunity for me to engage with other people excited about AI. So I appreciate your presence, your questions, sharing with me. And I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat here. If you have any follow-up questions or things like that, I'm only an email away. I do other presentations as well. So if you're looking for your district to talk about AI resistant assignments, using AI as a teacher, as a student, or developing AI policies for your school or district, I hope you'll think of me.